So we'll get started with our webinar. Adam, thanks for joining us this morning, and thanks for all the research you did with the background and everything. So anything you want to add before we get started?
No, I mean, I will say this, I apologize in advance. I'm coming off of a cold, so if I cough a little bit, I apologize, but that's the reality of the season. So
That's for sure. I think everybody on the call identifies. So um, we talk a lot about, there's interest in this because it is something that represents, moving to a continuing care retirement community represents a big investment. Aside from maybe your home purchase, probably your biggest investment you've made. So there's a lot of options out there. A lot of communities offer different things. So what we'll do is give you kind of an overview of how entrance fee pricing here works. And then again, we'll have Adam do the deep dive. This is different than anything else you've purchased. You've bought cars, you've bought homes, all kinds of things. But buying the promise of life care is different. And so that's why we spend a lot of time educating people about how it works, how it's structured, and just know that the way we are structured and regulated is all through the state of Michigan. So it is a highly regulated industry, as it should be, dealing with people and people's lives. So it is certainly a big, we take that responsibility seriously. So coming into independent living, whether you're coming into our Raybrook campus or Bretton Woods campus, there's an entrance fee upfront, and then there's a monthly fee. I'll talk about the entrance fee first. We offer for the most part, three different entrance fees on most of our apartments and homes. Bretton Homes North, new construction, is a little different. That has a little higher refundable option. But for the most part, we offer three plans: a 35-65, a 50-50, and a 75-25. The 35-65, 35% goes into the non-refundable, and 65% goes into the refundable. 50-50, those are split evenly. And 75-25, 75% is non-refundable, 25% is refundable. The non-refundable is what buys the life care. And if you would boil down our life care agreement, it's 147 pages. I've read them. And if you boil it all down, it promises two things. The first thing it promises is that if you need higher care, you're guaranteed higher care. That's going to be a bigger deal as more and more boomers put a strain on the healthcare system with increasing clients and a decreasing workforce. So having that promise of care is huge. The second thing it promises is that if you do outlive your money, that you're not asked to leave. That while you're at Holland Home, you always have a home. So that non-refundable portion becomes part of Holland Home, or amortizes at 1.5% per month. So while it says it's non-refundable, if someone left, if it's a single person and they left Holland Home before 5.5 years, part of the non-refundable, even though it says it's non-refundable, would come back. Maybe they left to move to another state or have passed. Part of that non-refundable would come back because it takes 5.5 years for that to become fully part of Holland Home. The refundable, day one really what your refundable approximately will be when you leave. It's the refundable amount less a sales fee and a refurbishing fee. Those equal 10% of the entire entrance fee. So that refundable comes back to you depending on where you are. Typically at Holland Home, it's 9 months, or when the apartment or home resells, whichever comes first. Bretton Homes North has a little different timing. So the longest you'd have to wait for that refundable is about 9 months. and that maybe you've gone to assisted living and you need that entrance, that refundable to help pay for your care. I think this speaks to, when you're looking at different communities, you look and say, what kind of community is it? And I think the fact that we offer a lot of options shows that we want you to be in control. We want you to have choices. Holland Home doesn't say, here's the price for a 2-bedroom, 1,200 square feet, like it or lump it. We give people options. So I think that speaks a little bit to the culture. Secondly, if there is a second person, if there are 2 people moving in, there's a second person fee to buy life care for the second person. That life care can be paid for upfront, $30,000 upfront. That $30,000 is part of the non-refundable, and so it again becomes part of Holland Home at 1.5% per month. So if that one of the persons leaves Holland Home before 5.5 years, part of that comes back as well. Others choose $350 a month because they want to. They'd rather pay it monthly than pay something upfront. Some people, they do the $30,000 because, look, I just sold my house, I've got the money, we're late 60s, we're in good health, we hope we live there a long time. Somebody conversely, maybe late 80s, maybe one person has health issues, they don't know how long 2 people will be there, so they choose the $350. If you look, about half and half of our couples choose one, half choose the other. Again, I think it shows that where we can offer you an option, we do. We don't just say, here it is. Important point there, break-even point between those 2 for a second person fee is about $350 a month or $30,000, 7 years, 2 months. So if you chose the $350 and there's 2 people in the apartment for 15 years, you're going to pay that the whole time. And if you choose the $350, so it's not like you get to 30 and like, oh, I can stop. No, the $350 continues. The $350 never goes up. Our monthly fees will increase based on costs. $350 is never going to increase. So that's kind of in 5 minutes or maybe longer, a little overview of entrance fees up front. Our monthly fees here are $8.99 at Breton and $9.02 at Raybrook. They now include cable, internet, in addition to all the maintenance-free items, the maintenance-free home appliances, etc. Access to our Vibrant Living wellness initiative with amazing programming and active community access to the pool and the fitness centers and the restaurants, etc. And unlike our peer communities, we don't offer a meal plan. So if you don't ever go to the restaurant, we have a restaurant both campuses now. If you don't go there, you're not required to pay any food. You're not going to be billed. So again, we leave you in control. So that's a big overview. I talked a lot about kind of 30,000-foot view about the pricing, how it works. But for the second time, I think in about 2 years, Adam has done a deep dive into Holland Home compared to our peer communities as far as where's the value, how do we stack up when it comes to both entrance fee and monthly fee pricing. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam. Adam, if you have anything to add to the discussion there on the entrance fees, please add it and then jump right into the results of your findings.
Yeah, perfect. Michael, can you hear me okay? First of all.
I can. Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, I won't add a ton right out of the gate to what you said, Michael. So as you alluded to, a couple years ago, we did a bit of a study to kind of understand a little bit better where we were positioned from an economics perspective compared to a number of our peer organizations in the area. Just at first, it was mainly birthed out of a desire just to kind of see where we stood. We hadn't done a detailed study like this really in I don't know how long. I mean, if we'd ever done one to this extent, and so we updated it this last year. Again, there's been a lot of obviously activity over the last couple of years. So when we first did this in 2021, we didn't have in 2021 we didn't have inflation at 10-15%. We didn't have labor markets where they are today. We didn't have a housing market that is a bit unusual, but seems to be still relatively stable, even despite kind of a record ramp up in interest rates over the course of the last year. And so we were really curious to see what updated look on the same analysis would reveal to us. So I'll talk about that in a minute. That was my teaser. But really, part of this is understanding too how complex, even as you go and look at a Holland home compared to some of our peers, you go, well, we have this, they have that, and how do we kind of work through some of that nuance? You'll find some communities that include everything. It's more like all inclusive, right? You have a meal plan, you might have a standard set of housekeeping you get every month. You might have a handful of other things that are all in. Some might include property taxes in the monthly fee. Some bill it separately. Holland Home kind of passes through a property tax allocation separately outside of the monthly fee. A number of communities do that. Some do include them in. But then really understanding, what's in, what's out. For Holland Home, our philosophy and approach has been to try and maintain as much of an a la carte kind of pricing model as possible, because what it allows us to do and enables us to do is hold kind of that monthly fee down to as low a level as we possibly can, which allows hopefully more folks to find Holland Home affordable within their own resources, right? And so part of that too is also understanding where our entrance fees stack up, and again, our philosophy has been the more we can kind of hold entrance fees or monthly fees, which we can't always do, but the more affordable we can maintain those, the bigger the market is that we could potentially serve and number of folks we can care for. And so we viewed that as our, that's our calling, that's our mission, that's what we've been doing for over 130 years is caring for people. And obviously the economics have changed over that 130 years. Care needs have changed. Expectations as far as living environments have certainly changed over the last 130 years, but our mission remains steadfast in that. And so one of the things, before I get into kind of the comparative information, one of the other things to note is the life care promise is real. And that is ultimately what you're acquiring here, not just access to incredible facilities, 4 or 5 star rated nursing care centers, amazing memory care, which we continue to invest heavily in. We view that as a deep part of our calling as we move through the next couple decades here in our community, as to how can we expand what we do in memory care as more folks desperately seek assistance there, whether as a caregiver or as somebody who's seeking care themselves. And so not only is that part of the equation, but there's a life care promise itself. And while most people don't anticipate running out of resources, none of us hope for that. There are some who just happen to outlive their resources, and we count it a humble privilege for us to be able to care for them, regardless of their financial circumstances or resources. And so every year, that's about $5 million worth of care that we provide that we don't get directly compensated for, and we have a strong constituency that supports us through donations and things like that. But that's another piece of the life care promise that's become a really critical pillar for some folks and their families. A large number of people won't ever need to access that, but it's an incredible peace of mind additive for those who are living with us and their family and friends as well. So it's just another component here. So getting back to kind of the economics and the study itself, there's all kinds of ways to slice and dice this thing. And so again, what we tried to do was we took all this data, we looked at all these entrance fees. There's probably more than 1,000 different entrance fee floor plan combinations across the number of peers we evaluated. We looked at, about 7 or 8 peer organizations. We looked across everything. We looked at refundable versus non-refundable. We looked at sales fee considerations, refurb fees, all the monthly fee considerations, what's in, what's out, and tried to normalize it as best we could as we looked at comparatives here. And what we did was we really looked at a 10-year time horizon. And 10 years is usually long enough to ensure kind of full recognition of the non-refundable piece. So really, you're just looking at the refundable as effectively your cost. That's the way to look at it, is the refundable piece, and the non-refundable piece, excuse me. The non-refundable piece is really your cost. The refundable piece ultimately is coming back to you. And so if you look at that non-refundable component, evaluate that. What does that break down to over a 10-year period of time? And then what are your monthly fees? What are your monthly costs going to be while residing in that community? Again, not adjusting for inflationary factors. Again, we're trying to keep apples to apples here. What does that ultimate cost look like to you after 10 years? And how does that break down for a single, for a couple, on a per square foot basis, all of that stuff. So we really kind of honed all of this in. And as Michael alluded to, it can get really noisy, especially as communities add different varietals and things as to what you can add and what you can take out. But one thing to note is from a couple perspective, right? So Holland Home it's kind of you're either a $350 a month or a $30,000 one time. Like that's it. It's not a $30,000 one time and you're paying a second person monthly on top of that. You'll find some communities where you're paying a one-time entrance fee for a second person and you're paying a monthly on top of that. So you find some that are the same as Holland Home and some where you actually wind up doing both. You're paying an additional entrance fee and you're paying a monthly fee. Those are all considerations. Now, Holland Home, it's not that way. It's you're either picking $30,000 up front or $350 a month. And that's kind of how it stacks out. You look at it, and I often say as people go, well, I picked $350 and I paid more than I would have in the 30. And I go, well, that's awesome because you're still here. And you're still like you outlived what you thought, which is amazing and incredible. And so it's a more unique take on it, I suppose. But anyway, considering all these things, we really looked at things over a 10-year time horizon, and this is a thing I would encourage all of you to do as you're talking to other communities. Say, hey, could you model out for me what my costs could be over a 10-year period of time? And we use 10 years because that's generally the average length somebody might be with us in independent living. It ebbs and flows. We have some who've been with us for 3 decades. Awesome. We have some people who aren't with us very long at all, but on the average for us, it's about 10 years or so. And so that's the basis for how we established our study. So when we looked at 1-bedroom units as an example and compared ourselves to our peers, we were about 22% less in all-in costs over that 10-year period of time compared to our peers, which also, if you care about it on a per square foot basis, is about 53% on a per square foot basis, if that's one of the ways you want to look at it. So a lot of value from a space perspective, often compared to some of our peer organizations. For 2-bedroom units, which tend to be our most desired, frankly, we're about 9% lower than kind of our closest peers as far as the all-in costs over that 10-year period of time. And then 2 bedrooms, again, if you looked at a per square foot basis, winds up being about 54% less on a per square foot basis. Overall, if you kind of baked everything in, we run about 19% less all in, and then that's about 58% less on a per square foot basis. And so part of that is, we do these studies to help us understand where we are in the market compared to our peers, making sure we're not out of whack, but also the discovery that we provide significant value for folks. One of the other things I'll add is, as we look at entrance fees, we're always sensitive to what's happening in the real estate market because often people's biggest asset that they have is their home. That tends to make up at least a third, sometimes more of somebody's total assets. Sometimes it's 70% of their total assets, to be honest. It just kind of depends where they're at in life. And so we're relatively real estate sensitive in at least knowing where the market is as far as average home sale values in Kent County. And I say this not saying, hey, you should all move into Holland Home, which you all should, but there's still never been, I said this 2 years ago, and I'm saying it today, there's still never been a better time to sell your home and capture that in an entrance fee. So as an example, when I look back 6 years ago, our average 50-50 entrance fee across our entire portfolio of entrance fees, our weighted average, approximated about 85 to 90% of the average home sale value in Kent County. Today, it approximates about 67%. That's to say that our entrance fees and how we've adjusted them, we've not been able to keep up, frankly, with the pace at which home sale values have continued to climb in Kent County, and they've continued to go up even despite the fact we've seen record rises in interest rates over the last 12 months or so. And so that's one of the things we look at. We look at the distribution of our entrance fees compared to the distribution of home sale values in Kent County and where most of our entrance fees stacked up compared to where home sale values are in the county. And we always like to be a little to the left of that. It means there's a lot of value for folks to unlock, capture an entrance fee, put that in their savings, put that in their pocket, and hold on to that for the future, perhaps future care needs they may have, or just hold on to it and keep it in their estate. So that's one thing we consistently look at is the average home sale value and where we currently stack up. One other little nugget here. So oftentimes, folks think that, a place like Holland Home is unattainable or unaffordable for folks. But frankly, from an entrance fee standpoint, we try and hold a number of our floor plans that have entrance fees of below $100,000. Again, there'd be a refundable component to that too. And so if you look at 2/3 of our total floor plan, so over 750 plus units, 2/3 of them have an entrance fee, a 50-50 entrance fee of less than $250,000. The average home sale value in Kent County right now is north of $360,000. And so that tells you there's a significant amount of opportunity for folks in their home values to be able to easily or reasonably afford a place like Holland Home. Again, it's all birthed out of our desire to try and be as affordable as possible to as many people as possible, because it opens up so much more of the community that we can serve in our facilities. One of our points of tension is the fact that the cost of construction has continued to climb, and so you're going to see us, to be candid, here's the additional little emphasis here. Entrance fees are not going to go down. Cost of construction is proving to be a challenge as we think about potentially building more. And so when we think about where entrance fees are today and what they could or maybe need to be in order to add new units to a campus, there is some difference between where entrance fees are on existing product and where they could be on new product, and how we think about moving those in the future. And so that's just to say entrance fees aren't going to go down. They're likely going to continue to go up at least incrementally, assuming we don't have a kind of cataclysmic event in the housing market. And even then, as I just noted, there's a significant gap between average home sale values and where our weighted average entrance fees are. And we have a lot of space where we don't really need to be as price sensitive to real estate as maybe some of our peers are that might be at or above the average home sale value in Kent County. So that's just a little nugget. A couple other one other thing I always encourage people to ask about when they're talking to communities is understanding how property taxes work. Some communities include them in the monthly, some it's a pass through. Some amazingly have avoided assessment. How they pulled it off, we don't know, but that's another side question to ask folks is to say, hey, how do property taxes work? For us, we bill it outside of the monthly fee, and that's somewhat intentional because then our residents see both the amount of property taxes they're paying, but it also allows them to more easily perhaps claim that as a deduction on their income taxes if they're so inclined to do. It makes it a little simpler for them, makes it a little easier on us to kind of create that sense of transparency that's effectively just a pass through and not really reflective of a cost to operate our buildings aside from what's being assessed from the respective municipalities. So I think I'll stop there. Michael, did I miss anything?
No, I think one of the things you touched on, which I want to kind of reinforce, is that the continuum follows you completely through the system at Holland Home. Some of our peer communities, that promise of care and life care stops at independent living. So one of the things is you're looking at, you have a lot of options in West Michigan, one of the most prolific regions of the country with options for older adults. Make sure that continuum of care or that promise of care continues through all levels of care, and it's in writing. So that's so critical because that's why you come to a community like Holland Home, that you want that guarantee. The other thing two other things I'm going to say. One is I want to circle back that it's all this pricing and everything, but it's still the access to quality care and then really a vibrant community. Our vibrant living team, Marenta and her team, are just rock stars with whatever's going, all kinds of programming and activities and whole structure that people can age successfully. So whether it's spiritually, intellectually, physically, socially, all of those, emotionally, all of those things are so critical for aging. And so our Vibrant Living is an award-winning initiative, top 25 in the North America Beacon Award. So when we say it's award-winning, we can say that. And the other thing I'm going to say is that Holland Home remains locally managed. So Adam's office is on Raybrook Street. He lives in the community with his family. Our president and CEO, Troy Vactavine, same. We are not governed by an out-of-state entity that doesn't have a local presence or local management. I think that's huge. And so we will always do our best to make sure that never changes here at Holland Home, because we feel it's critically important to our mission and to our heritage of 131 years. So you probably have questions. So I'm going to look for those in the Q&A, what questions you have. While we do that, I am going to mention that we do have 1-bedroom apartments available right now, and we do have a 2-bedroom at Breton and a small 2-bedroom Carina at Raybrook. So if you are thinking of locking in pricing before the year end and there's a price increase, anything you reserve now, you're not going to move until spring. So, but we have, only a dozen, probably a dozen or so apartments between both places available. So Fee, the question here, first question is, what's our fee increase for next year?
Oh man, I have to be sensitive how I answer this because I haven't told all the. So I should say this. So our fees increase, our monthly fees increase every April 1. Okay, so um, we notify residents 60 days in advance, and we actually typically telegraph that a little bit even farther in advance than that. So if we think it's going to be a more significant window of time or more significant increase, we give a longer window of time in which we communicate kind of what we're seeing. So uh, I'm giving a long-winded answer, but I think this is important to establish how we provide transparency with our existing residents. So every quarter we do board updates. As part of that, they can ask us any questions they want. We have a resident advisory board that we as an executive leadership team meet with. They can ask us any questions they want. We provide them information as to what's going on in the organization, where things are at compared to where we budgeted, planned for, all of that stuff. And as an example, last year was a bit of a bonkers year because of where all of our costs were running to as far as food costs and all that kind of stuff. And so we started to telegraph or communicate to all the residents actually mid-year last year. So we started to communicate back in June about what we thought the potential rate increase could be April of 2023. I will say our average monthly increase for independent living is generally between 3 and 5%. And percentages can be deceiving because we have a lower monthly fee. So as an example, last year, which we considered to be a more significant net increase, it was an increase of $45 a month. To be honest, that's what it was, which was a little bit more significant. It generally averages, or it's hovered between kind of 35 and $45 a month. Could it be above 45 a month in the future? Perhaps, but we're not looking at nearly a significant increase this next go. As far as entrance fees go, and again, all this has to run through, so I can't even say for certain what the rate increase is going to be because this will also go through board approval this next cycle. But if you look at entrance fee increases, those are more significant. Coming January 1, we're looking at about an average increase of about 10%, depending on the unit type and floor plan. If it's a 1-bedroom, a little less, kind of in that 5-6% range. If it's a 2-bedroom, it's above. Typically, it's going to be above 10%. This next go. So that's kind of independent living where things stand. So.
Okay, good. Next question, what determines which percent you pay for refundable and non-refundable? Do you want to take that, Adam, or you want me to?
I can take it.
Okay.
You determine, really. So, as you're looking at the various floor plans that we have, you make the determination as to which entrance fee plan you would like, whether you want one with a higher refundable that'll come back to you, which is the 3565. That's actually, it's a higher overall entrance fee that you pay, but there's more that comes back. You pick the 50/50 plan, which I think is self-explanatory, and then the 75/25, which is the lowest entrance fee you pay, but it also provides the lowest amount back to you. And so that gives you a fair amount of flexibility. You can kind of choose what you'd like, but that determination is made by you as you're looking to move in. I will say the only time it might be a little bit more heavily influenced is if as we're having that discussion, a 35/65, which is a higher entrance fee, might be more of a stretch. We might push you more towards a 75/25 to help preserve your assets a little bit longer, which can be a little counterintuitive. But we view it as though we have a vested interest in helping folks to preserve their assets as long as possible as well.
Great. Wayne asks, what are some entrance fee range examples? So if you look at, I'll just give you one example of Breton Terrace. A 1-bedroom on a 75/25 plan will start about 125 plus parking. And it would go up to a large 2-bedroom that's on the 3565, that's 406. So right now, anywhere at Breton Terrace, about 125 to 406. And now we're comparing our lowest price plan for our smallest apartment to our largest price plan for our largest apartment. So it will vary by building and be vary based on square footage and the like. So hopefully that answers your question. This is the Fitch rating. So I'll let you take this one. The Fitch rating of BBB minus is somewhat disconcerting. The analyst said that one of the ways that could be rectified is larger fees. How do you intend to balance the quality of your financial ratings with the need to increase fees and the desire to keep prices affordable for the middle income seniors? So maybe Adam, you could take that, but maybe first talk about what Fitch is, because many of our viewers may not know what that is.
Yep, absolutely. So Holland Home has fixed rate publicly issued bonds. So we issue them through municipalities, City Kentwood, City of Grand Rapids, and the Michigan Strategic Fund. We've used those to fund facilities and renovations over the years. Fixed rate debt, we locked in all of our interest rates over the last 7 years. So actually we have the lowest cost of capital than we've had in our modern history as it stands today, which is just around or right below 4% is what we pay on all of our fixed rate debt. So interest rates can go sky high. It doesn't impact what we pay in debt service, which is nice. We like to have that fixed in. We don't have to worry about that. So Fitch rates our debt. So people may have heard of Fitch or Standard & Poor's, folks like that. Fitch rates the majority of continuing care retirement communities in the United States. There are, I believe, for sure, less than 250 rated continuing care retirement communities in the United States, Holland Home being one of them. We've been rated for the last 20 plus years. And so every year Fitch comes out and does what's called an examination, and they take a look at both our financials. They look at what's going on within the organization. They talk to management, understand what our current and future plans are, all of those things. They look at all of our key ratios, and then they kind of make an assessment and say, okay, based on this, do we think there's grounds for any rating action here? Whether that's a change in rating, maintaining the rating, change in outlook, maintaining the outlook. We've for the last 5 or 6 years now maintained at a BBB minus with a stable outlook, which we're given the tumultuousness of the last several years. We're actually really pleased with that. There's been a number of peer communities who have not been rated at all. So there's a number of peer communities that aren't rated at all. And we happen to be. We think there's a lot of value add there. We also, as part of our fixed rate bond offerings, we have to disclose our finances every single quarter to all of our bondholders. So just like you might find public company registrants submitting quarterly information to shareholders, we do the same thing. Out there is publicly available information. Everybody can see that. And so we disclose that every single quarter. A couple of things to note for us is the volume of resident assistance we provide is unlike that of a lot of our peer organizations or a lot of those others that are rated by Fitch. And so our $5 million of uncompensated care is included in our operating gain or loss. The offset of that happens through investment return and contribution revenues, which happens below that line. And so when you look at some of our ratios, they look a little squirrely, but that's because that's where that comes from. So the BBB minus rating is an investment grade rating. The reason why it's not higher than that is simply from a liquidity standpoint. Our debt service coverage ratio, we're throwing off right now a 3.5 times. Our covenant's a 1.2 times. So just to drill into that just a little bit, I feel like I want to get a little specific on this, just because that's the number of times we can pay our annual debt service through the cash coming into the organization. And so a 3+ times over is an incredible rate of cash inflow into the organization. Much of that gets plowed right back into capital and keeping the facilities updated. We've spent a record amount of capital over the last kind of 5 to 10 years into the organization. So we haven't built up our liquidity. We're plowing that right back into the organization. Our days cash on hand is right around kind of the 220 to 230 range. So what's days cash on hand? That's the number of days the organization can continue to exist, assuming it doesn't get another dollar in at its current operating levels. And so our target's to get to 365. We're kind of nickel and diming our way up there. And so we're actually not that concerned about the BBB- rating. That puts us ahead of a number of our peers, and it puts us in that investment grade category. You'll find a number of peer organizations might be AA, single A, AAA, and then the difference between their borrowing costs and our borrowing costs sometimes is negligible. And so they wind up sitting on 700, 800, 900 days cash on hand. And to be candid, I would feel that to be an inappropriate position for us to hold. So if we had a days cash on hand position that was as significant as an A-rated organization, I would be concerned that we're not returning enough back into the organization or the community itself. And so part of it is holding that tension for us as to, what rate increases do we need to balance the operating needs of the organization, ensure a sufficient amount of liquidity to plow into new initiatives, whether that's new property development, things like that, but also make sure we're not out of balance with what is reasonable here. Again, keeping in mind we're trying to be as affordable as possible. And so for us, our 230, 240 days cash on hand position is one of our strongest over the last 5 or 6 years. And so we're really encouraged by that. So that's just a little commentary on that because the question was asked. And it's fair to ask, to be honest. I like questions like this because it lets us get to the meat of the stuff. I wish I could talk about this for a really long time, to be honest, but I'm sure a lot of you are like, could he just stop talking about this? But for those who are interested, I really love talking about it because there's so much nuance to what we do. And it's such an important question, partly because it's my job, but to ask a number of our peer organizations too, to make sure that they're stable and they understand all the levers in their business and what do all these different things mean to them. I think it's a very reasonable question to ask for those who are really interested in asking it.
So Marcia, gold star for you for asking about Fitch. So you just made Adam's day. So that's great. Richard asked, please repeat what is available now. So right now we have 1-bedroom apartments available at Estates 1, Estates 3 at Raybrook, Breton Ridge and Breton Terrace. We have 1-bedroom apartments available at those buildings. We have small 2-bedroom. We have one of those at Raybrook Estates 1, a Carina, and we have a Cypress available at Breton Ridge. So if someone wanted one of those units and they put their $5,000 deposit down, they could lock in 23 pricing and then not move until the apartment's ready for them in 2024. So if you want to beat the price increase, you want a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom at Raybrook Estates 1 or Breton Ridge, that's a great way to do it. And that kind of leads into the next question. John asked, can I pay the entrance fee in November and not move till next year? You could, if you reserve a specific apartment and put the $5,000 down, if you pick your next home and then put the $5,000 down, you locked in. So even though you're going to close and sign the continuing care agreement in 24, you're not going to be, you would be locked into 23 pricing. So next question, if you run out of money, how much of your income are you allowed to keep going forward? I'll defer to you on that one.
Yeah. I'll answer this as it depends. So if this is within assisted living, so these are, we typically look to Medicaid, generally Medicaid rules. So in skilled nursing, that's where Medicaid rules would typically apply. In those cases, Medicaid allows you to keep $60 a month, but you have to stay below $2,000 in assets. On the assisted living side, when we provide resident assistance there. So again, this isn't linked to Medicaid. This is just Holland Home. What we do is we adjust it based on what your living expenses may be. So if you have pharmacy costs, if you have other ancillary costs that you need resources to help cover, whether that's a reasonable clothing expenditure, that kind of thing, we'll adjust what you pay based on those needs. And so it's a pretty active dialogue, and we're intentionally flexible in that, because no two circumstances are alike. We kind of have some general guidelines where essentially it's you pay literally as much as you can, and then we kind of talk about the rest to make sure that expenditures are reasonable, that we're allowing for things like that. So I mean, certainly there are some expenditures that once you're in resident assistance, the expectation is that you limit those things, right? Like you can't be giving away gobs of money, because ultimately that means Holland Home is funding your generosity, which means those who are generous to Holland Home are actually funding your generosity. So that's the thing we work through is what's reasonable in those cases. But again, I won't even say a specific dollar amount for assisted living, because it's dependent upon each individual circumstances and what's going on with their needs and their own resources.
Great, thanks. Next question: how does the level of care impact pricing? Entrance fees, monthly fees. What if one spouse is in one level of care and the other is in another? Do you want to take that?
Sure. So when we talk about levels of care, these are really differing care need assessments, right? And so everybody in independent living is theoretically independent. And once you move into a higher level of care, it's really just a different level of care needs, typically linked to activities of daily living, right? Like you need assistance with something else, and you can no longer really live independently on your own. At that point in time, that individual likely transition into assisted living. They're going to pay a daily rate based on the level of care they've been assessed at, and we have levels 1 through 5 based on varying levels of kind of scoring against the standard set of activities of daily living kind of protocols that we look at. And then that gets evaluated at least every year. Every person in assisted living gets evaluated at least every year, if not more frequently, depending on kind of observed changes, right? And then that helps lead to whether there needs to be an adjustment in the rate that they pay based on their assessed level of care. So what you could have, though, is you could have a couple. I'll run through this scenario where one of them remains in independent living and the other one moves into assisted living. So in those cases, for as long as somebody's still in the independent living unit, you're going to pay that monthly fee, and then you're going to wind up paying the daily fee to provide for the care for the individual in assisted living. I will say there is no additional entrance fee to go from independent living to assisted living. Once you're in independent living, you've paid your entrance fee. There's not another one along the way. You just kind of move through at that point. And so that kind of delineates how you can move through the system and access the care as you go. And again, we have assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing throughout our continuum. We anticipate no changes in the volume of care that we're delivering there. So we continue to provide skilled nursing and significant volume of memory care. Some peers in our community have kind of exited skilled nursing. We still view ourselves very much as a healthcare provider and view that as a core component of what we do. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit.
Good. This next question is from an incoming resident, so I don't think we can address this on your personal circumstance, but the question is, will I be required to keep the long-term care policy I now have? I think we'd have to answer that offline. I don't have that information here, but
I would say if it's been, so as part of the as part of the admission process, we have folks kind of complete a financial disclosure. So to speak on why we do that, part of that, it's really to ensure folks are landing in the right floor plan, the right entrance fee for them, right? So what we don't want to have is somebody who goes, hey, look, I can take the value of my home and go, park it in a $400,000 entrance fee, but they have no other assets. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a vested interest in making sure our residents can preserve their assets for as long as possible. So if on your financial disclosure, you've disclosed that you have a long-term care policy, we may have considered that as part of looking at kind of your very high level picture of the assets available to you. And so to the extent that you've incorporated that, the expectation is that you would keep that. Although if the rate goes bonkers on that and it's becoming a problem, then that's where you just have a dialogue with us as to what makes sense in your particular circumstances. We found some people who the long-term care policy turns out to be a really significant asset for them, and really helps kind of shore up even their financial picture, depending on their circumstances. And so, to your point, Michael, it's more a question that we could look at on a case-by-case basis. But to the extent that you've incorporated it or included it on your financial disclosure, we may have considered that as part of, making sure you're in the right floor plan and entrance fee.
Yeah, and I think the question also is a good opportunity to discuss long-term care. When you see and this, you may not know this, but like when we see incoming residents, the majority of which do not have long-term care insurance. Would you say that's maybe, I don't know what the percentage would be.
Yeah, I would say 85% probably don't have long-term care insurance. Again, this is long-term care insurance is very much a person by person determination as to what makes sense for them. I'm actually having this conversation with my parents right now, to be honest, because they're asking my opinion on some things. But what makes sense as to whether you should have it or should not have it. Again, everybody's made different decisions along the way, but the vast majority of the residents we see coming in don't have a long-term care policy. Although those who do, it comes in, it turns out to be a nice benefit for them, particularly as they go through assisted living or need home care. A lot of them offer home care benefits. Some of them offer caregiver benefits, depending on what's in there. So there's some unique things in those policies, but if you waited until you're kind of closer to the later years of your life, a long-term care policy probably doesn't make sense for you anymore. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and I think traditionally, the older the policy, the stronger it is.
Yes.
I think because
Yes.
insurance companies have figured out the actuarials.
Yeah.
But I think your point is exactly right. I mean, I worked with someone that the only reason they qualified to come in was because of their long-term care policy. So thankfully they had that. So Daniel asks, will this webinar be archived and accessible to family members that can receive the information? Absolutely. Yeah, you'll get an email probably early next week with a link to it, but it'll be housed on our website under resources and webinars. So it'll be there. I think it's also part of our transparency to make sure this information is out there. So looks like we have one more question. And this is one for you, Adam, because it's talking about property taxes and it's a little detailed here. With housing values increasing, property taxes will also increase. On an annual basis, what has been the increase in property taxes in the last 2 or 3 years, both Kentwood, where Bretton Woods campus is, and Grand Rapids, where Raper campus is? So, and can any of property taxes be recovered on state income tax with the homestead exemption?
Good question. I wish I could control all of this. We do our best. We push back if we feel like assessments are unreasonable. I would say the average, this last year, I think everybody saw about a 5% increase in those municipalities. I know I did. where I live, we did in Grand Rapids and Kentwood. Some of it is that they're limited a bit as to the max increase they can push through, but generally it's been aside from this last year, which was the highest I'd seen, which was 5%. It's generally been about 2 to 3% a year. Again, assuming there's no change to the assessed value of the underlying property, meaning we put in an improvement, something like that, which none of our existing properties have anything which would actively change that value. So it really is just them moving the needle on a couple things. So the next question is, can any of the property taxes be recovered on state income tax? I will say that depends on your personal situation. I will not claim to give tax advice. That's my first disclaimer. I'm not foolish enough to be in a recording and provide tax advice, other than to say that I think you could explore claiming the property taxes. Again, this is one of the reasons why we bill it separately, so it's a little easier for you to identify for your own as to whether you could potentially claim it on your state income tax return through homestead exemption. Again, I'd work through that with a tax advisor. Oftentimes, though, the nice thing here is that living in these communities, your fellow residents often know as much as I do about how some of these things will work for you in your particular circumstances. But because we bill it out separately, in our opinion, you should be able to at least view that as those are property taxes you paid. So go boldly and determine how you might be able to incorporate them through tax law into what might work for your personal situation. But again, I would recommend consulting tax advisors if you're uncertain or need some specific tax advice there.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're the one that has to sign your tax return. We don't, so that's why you should get professional advice. So
yeah,
I don't see any other questions. So unless one pops in here, thank you for joining the webinar. This is our last one for 23. We'll come out with a new series next year. But if this has raised questions, reach out to your senior living consultant, and they can try to answer your questions. We do, as I mentioned, have some availability right now to lock into 23 pricing. Thank you, Adam, for your hard work and the deep dive. I know that was not a 20-minute project. So thank you for getting all that together and doing the analysis. I think it's helpful for people that are in the market. And I don't see anything else. Adam, anything you want to add as we wrap up?
No, I mean, these are really awesome questions. And I think the big thing for us is we try and be as transparent as possible. And so there's going to be questions that came up that you have that, we couldn't go into detail on perhaps, or we could go into more detail on a situation by situation basis. But this is an important thing for us to be as transparent as possible. We want you to be informed whether you choose Holland Home or another community. We hope everybody chooses Holland Home. But we recognize that folks may not choose Holland Home, but at the end, we just want folks to be as informed as possible. And so we do this with our own residents too. I mean, this is every quarter we're trying to be as transparent as we possibly can. And so part of that is the mission comes above all else. And so that's who we are, is trying to be as transparent as possible. We're imperfect people doing this imperfectly. And so we do our best every day to again, tell our story, make sure residents are as informed as possible. And hopefully that will be all of you someday as part of our communities. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks again, Adam. Thanks for joining us. Have a blessed holiday, and we will see you in the new year. Take care, everybody.
Yep.